It is the weekly here on the Blue Room, and what a week for Evertonians. Big news starting the week off with Everton potentially almost having new owners. Joining me to go through that and some football as well are Rodger Armstrong. Rodger, how are you? You're not feeling 100%, but this momentous Everton occasion has got you up off your sick bed to have a chat about it.
Yeah, thank you. I've been under the weather, kind of off grid for a while. Pneumonia sounds worse than it is, but I can confirm to everyone it's really not that nice. But yeah, I'm happy to join you. And some positive news about Everton. I mean, Christ, that's better than any antibiotic.
Absolutely. And Patric Ridge as well. Patrick, how are you, mate?
Yeah, thankfully not as under the weather as Rodger. I'm sorry to hear that, mate. But yeah, positive. Yeah, all good. Positive news, I guess, off the pitch for once, which makes a change, doesn't it? I mean, the last time I was on here and talking about PSR things or everything, it's all just been negative off the pitch news. So we'll get into it, won't we? But however you look at the Friedkin group, I do think it's a positive step forward that something's happening, isn't it? At least, and this Moshiri tenure looks like it's coming to an end.
100%. Just before we do go ahead, as I'm saying on all our podcasts now, if you're watching this on YouTube, do hit like, do leave us a comment, and subscribe to the channel as well. Let us know what you think about all the topics we discussed today. And if you're listening on iTunes or Spotify, leave us a rating, leave us a review. All these things help as we try and get the podcast in front of and in the ears of more people. But yeah, there is only one place to start, isn't there? On Monday afternoon, Everton or Blue Heaven Holdings and the Friedkin Group put out a joint statement confirming that an agreement has been reached for the purchase of the football club. Rodger, I'll come to you first, mate. Obviously, as Patrick said, it's been, whenever we've spoken about these topics, and in the past, it's been doom and gloom, why things have not happened, why things are going badly. And it all just kind of came out of nowhere, didn't it, on Monday? From your point of view, were you surprised by the deal and surprised by the speed in which it came about?
Yeah, it was a surprise. Of course it was. I don't think Friedkin were ever out of the frame. And I think they have been throughout the most sensible, realistic and professional buyers for the football club. I think they're the smartest people in town. And I don't think it's anything to do with, Dexter, whoever he is, Texter, forcing people's hands by chatting on Sky Sports or Moshiri flipping a coin A to B. I think they're smart enough to get this, what appears to be a decent legal deal in place to protect them and also make sure there's no sort of lingering liabilities towards 777 or ACAP, whoever the hell it is, who's the creditor. And I think that's the thing that's unlocked it. And I think it's great news. I don't think there's any reason, this is a classic Everton, what could possibly go wrong moment. But even I am struggling to find something that could possibly go wrong from here in the next 4, 6, 8 weeks to get the appropriates. Yeah, thank you. That's an immediate jinx. But I can see very little that can stop this coming to fruition. And I welcome them very much as proper professional owners who've done some interesting things with Roma, which we may touch upon. So yeah, I'm positive. Shit, I mean that's an extraordinary statement.
Yeah, I mean, and same to you, Patrick. Really, it's always felt like these are the ones that everyone has kind of wanted, isn't it? Like as much as we've got a lot to learn about the Friedkin Group and who makes them up and what they do and how they run the football operations, they've almost felt like, as Rodger said, the most sensible people in the room here.
Yeah, I do remember. I think I was just about to board a plane when the news broke in July, at the end of July, that the deal had collapsed or they'd gone away from the talks after exclusivity period. And there was I was gutted in the way that it was just because again it was we've been talking on here, hadn't we, about it in a few episodes before that, because it just felt like it wasn't that I thought these guys are the perfect owners because we don't know for sure. But they do, like Rodger said, they do seem the most professional outfit in the room. They seem like they know how to run businesses successfully. They know how to run a football club, a big football club. You can go into it and say, well, have they been perfect? That's obviously up for debate, and everyone will have different opinions on that and the work that they've done at Roma. But there is evidence that they do have a plan. They do have some form of operational setup that's been missing from Everton, and they do have standards as well, which is a big thing. There's ambitions thrown around a lot. Moshiri had ambition, but he didn't have no idea how to get there. The hope with Friedkin is that they're different. So I was gutted in July when that didn't go through, because it was also that more of the thing of like, we're back to square one again. But then in the weeks after that, it did there was always talks about they're still around, they're still having contact with Everton, they're still there. Similar happened with Roma, that they withdrew, and I was like, well, is lightning going to strike twice? Maybe they just really did look at the ACAP thing and think we don't want anything to do with it. Obviously, as Rodger said, that wasn't the case, and it does appear that they've been able to come to some form of agreement that protects everybody. And obviously now, I guess the biggest hurdle has been, I heard yourself and Paddy talking about it, Matt, the biggest hurdle may well be, if it is a hurdle at all, really, getting that approval from Leadenhall, from the court, just to say this deal can be ratified, and that's the thing. It doesn't seem like it's going to be a massive issue from people who know more than me of saying and reporting. But other than that, the Premier League, I can't imagine, are going to be playing as hardball as they did with 777, rightly so in the end. And, FSA approval shouldn't matter, and FA approval should happen quickly. 777 got those before Christmas last year. So, fingers crossed. It's the start of a brand new day for Everton, and it's needed, isn't it? It has provided that lift that, unfortunately, for a few reasons, the football hasn't been able to do so far this season.
Yeah, I mean, Rodger, are the things Patrick mentioned there, there's the same sorts of things that appeal to you about the Friedkin group in that sense as well? It's one of them where we've had John Textor, haven't we, coming out making grand claims and, really intriguing, colourful lines about what he'd do at Everton and how much it'd mean to him. But I don't know about you, I've kind of had me fill of that over the past few years with our current team. It just feels like we need to not be a circus for a little bit now, and this group could be ideal for that.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I've heard far too many idiots being fed sound bites by people, whether it's the lunatics from 777 or the very well-intentioned John Textor, who was trying to ingratiate himself, understandably so. I was never ever a fan of being part of the multi-club model. I like the fact that they've focused on Roma, and they've done some decent stuff. They've taken some bold decisions. They're in a bit of shit with the fan base at the moment for sacking De Rossi, obviously, which was a bit controversial. However, I think that they have... Look, what do people expect? Whether you're a Roma fan or an Everton fan or even a Manchester United fan, what do you expect a new owner's going to do? Come and bring in an era of dominance like Liverpool in the 70s or City currently or Chelsea? It's not going to happen. Every single league is more competitive, apart from perhaps La Liga or Liga. But, I don't see... nobody has a God-given right to anything. And places in Europe, I think Roma still haven't qualified for the Champions League under the Friedkin group. They've had it for 4 years, but they have won a trophy. There's signs of progression. And they're prepared to take bold decisions. I think the most important thing that Patrick said is they have some standards. And we need standards, because we ain't had standards for years and years and years and years. And I want them to come in and make bold moves and make bold appointments from day one. Careful not to throw the baby out with the bathwater, because we still need to achieve 30-ish, 38, whatever points to stay in the damn league, which should be easy enough. But yeah, I think it's what we need: sensible, professional, ruthless people who are going to come in and turn this corner shop, which it still has been, into a business and into a competitive footballing organisation.
Yeah, and I think one of the other things that appeals, obviously, Patrick, as well, is that they have put a lot of money into Roma. As you both sort of alluded to, at the moment things aren't going well there with protests, and the CEO obviously walked, having received death threats. I think some of the fans in the week, it's all kicking off a little bit there, but they have put a lot of money into the football club, and I suppose one of the challenges they're going to have with Everton is the different debts that are still going to be paid off even when they do come in. I can't imagine they're going to necessarily come in and wipe the slate clean in that sense, but putting that money in and working towards maybe restructuring them, maybe paying some of it off. That kind of feels like the way we're going to get out from under this PSR cloud, which is kind of hampering us from being able to spend more money and improve the team, and et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing, isn't it? That whenever, say it gets completed in time for the January transfer window, and I think this would have been the same with John Textor as well, which always was pie in the sky purely because of the Palace thing, like having to sell his Palace shares. Like, it's been described as the most expensive season ticket in the Premier League because he's got 45% of a club. Like, who wants 45% of a club for what he's asking for it? That's the issue. So I think there will hopefully be a bit of money. It does free up money there to spend, even if that is Everton. I think we spoke about, Everton sold Amadou Onana for 50 million in the summer, but we couldn't spend that money because that money was like, well, we might need that money if something were to happen with the ownership and it doesn't go through by then, and we need to, for lack of a better term, I don't think administration was ever an issue, but keep the club running just day to day. We're going to need that influx of cash. Maybe now that changes. Now that if these guys, fingers crossed, are in by then, it becomes that we've got these owners with deep pockets. Yes, they've got the debt issues sorted out, but they can work on that. They'll either pay it off or they'll restructure it. However, they will do it, and it will maybe free Everton up to have some funds. It won't solve the PSR issue straight away. We still need to box smart. Obviously, we'll see if Everton have done enough. It'll be probably January time, won't we? We'll see if they've done enough in the previous set of accounts to get under the threshold. I think the hope is, and the expectation is that they have. So yeah, it's not like it's going to fix everything. There's still a long road ahead, as Rodger said. Like, you can't throw the baby out with the bathwater. But we touched on the De Rossi thing there. That yes, there is. I think that's a harsh sacking personally, but I don't know Roma inside out. I don't know everything. And when I looked into the results, well, they'd won 2 games in 13 in all competitions, stretching back to April. And it comes back to that word standards. Like, Everton have gone on worse runs last season. They went on a worse run the season before. The manager was sacked on that occasion. Same again with Benitez, the manager was sacked. Obviously, Dyche wasn't last year. And ultimately, that was probably however they got there, the right decision. But I don't think this ownership would allow that to happen again, because they don't want clubs to get into that rot and for that to be the bar that, 2 wins in 13 is good enough. So, and it doesn't matter if you're a club legend. That's where that ruthlessness comes in. Now, yes, it has got them in hot bother at Roma because De Rossi was so popular. And I think they said in the statement, that they think De Rossi is a fantastic manager. They just didn't think it was the right time. Maybe if they had the time again, they might try and give it 2 or 3 weeks more. But they had a person in mind that they wanted to come in who won his first game the other day. So, look, that just comes back to that word standards of what you expect. And so hopefully we can get onto this right track now. PSR can hopefully be a thing of the past once we get through this set of accounts. And then we can really start to look forward. And wouldn't it be brilliant if in the January transfer window it could be, we don't have a million, I don't have 60 million to spend, but that money that we did get for selling a star player in the summer, we can reinvest some of it this time. And it's not living hand to mouth, but we'll see when we get there. But I'm sure they want to make an impact as soon as possible, and they'll know that the best way to do that, with fans at least, is to kind of show some statement of intent, and whether that is on the pitch or making off the field changes, bringing in a CEO, which needs to be done, a proper board of directors. Like, those are the first things that they can do. Rodger mentioned, like, making a big impact straight away. That's something you can do without necessarily changing on-field matters, isn't it? Or even the director of football just yet. The first thing you do is get a proper board in place. And I hope that's happening already. So it's ready to go on day one.
Yeah, you're dead right.
Yeah, I think
first thing we need.
Sorry, go on, Rodger.
Chief. Sorry, just to jump in. Sorry. Patric's absolutely right. First thing we need is a chief executive, and that's it. Someone who can speak for the club and take the pressure off Dyche and everyone else. But someone who's going to come out, front up, this is us, this is Everton Football Club, this is our plan. And they have to sweep clean underneath that, all layers of senior management at the club. They've got to instill a new culture. The chief executive is a key first appointment, and I'd like to think that'll happen. And the appointment, it's all ready to go when the announcement can be official. That's the starting point. That's the trend. That's the trend change that we need.
Well, yeah. Well, I'm sort of going to touch on that. I'll come straight back to you on that, Rodger, because I imagine there will be a lot of people looking at this, and the focus will immediately go to, well, what's going to happen with the manager? What's going to happen with signings and all that kind of thing. But I suppose in some sense, if you're looking at it properly and how modern football clubs are run, it has got to come from the top down, hasn't it? Because you suppose in essence, the CEO comes in, then the board is formed, and then the board together with the CEO will pick the director of football, and then the director of football will set this footballing strategy and have a say in picking the manager along with the board as well. Like, it's got to kind of be, I think anyway, looking at that domino effect, I don't think they can come in and say, right, Sean Dyche is an our fella, let's get rid of him and replace him with somebody else, and then work our way back from there. It's got to be top down, hasn't it?
I think so. And whatever you think about Dyche and this dreadful run that we're on at the moment, I think sacking him would be utterly pointless, because you'd lose all that continuity, and you know, the squad is still his. You can debate whether the players are playing for him or just expressing themselves, and then he makes them stop with his silly substitutions. But no, a chief executive comes in, and before Dyche, the question of Dyche, we need a new director of football, and you know, can we just stop messing about that Thelwell's doing a good job and should be kept? It's nonsense. He's done a dreadful job. You know, and I think we need a brand new director of football as the second thing after a chief executive, and let them run their rule over the football club, and let the new director of football decide who is and isn't the right people, who are the right people to run the footballing operation. That's management, scouting, and everything else. That's just my personal view. It may sound harsh on Thelwell, but I've had enough of his nonsense and his sound bites and his everything will be fine, because it won't. You know, oh, I've had no money to spend. It's been really difficult. Nobody told you to sign Beto. Nobody told you to sign Mopé. I'm sorry. He's finished in my book.
Just touching on that as well. I think I think whatever your opinions on, because everyone's entitled to opinion on the director of football, the interim CEO, the manager. I definitely see that point, Roger. I think my biggest issue throughout the club at the minute, and it's all relative. And yes, I guess I imagine it has been a very relatively difficult environment to work in from a recruitment standpoint, from a management standpoint, from a thing of we don't know what's happening. I get that. But what I want now from Everton and across the board is excuses to stop. And
absolutely,
it's why the Thelwell interview last week kind of annoyed me a little bit, because, well, for one, I thought it's probably a bloke who might well not be here next July speaking about a manager who almost certainly won't be here in July. So it's almost like, well, whatever. But at the same time, it was just, it sounded like excuses, and I'm not, even if he didn't intend to do that, I'm like, okay, yeah, I get that. We get it's hard, but I don't want you to tell me it's hard. I know it's hard. Tell me what you're going to do to fix it. So whether they come in and they clean house, or they say we trust the guys who are here for now, let's get through to the end of the contracts and see whether that's up to them. That's up to Friedkin. That's up to the CEO that they appoint to make that call ultimately as well. That should be the first port of call really for the CEO to make those decisions. But I just want to see, the excuses stop now. And because we all know how hard it is. I don't think there's any fan, and all three of us here, who would say Dyche hasn't had a tough job in the circumstances. But at the same time, 100%. That doesn't excuse dreadful substitutions. It's the same with Thelwell. They've had a tough job in the circumstances. Doesn't excuse spending 10 million on Mopé. Everything can be true. And it's the one thing I did like about John Texter, because I know we haven't really touched on him, and I totally get, Matt, you were bang on exactly my thinking. It was like, I think with that Texter interview, if we hadn't seen it all before from Moshiri, we'd have all been like, oh, this is brilliant. But it was just so much like, it sounded like Moshiri. And I didn't mind that John Texter spoke about Sean Dyche, because honestly, I wanted, and that's not because I don't like Dyche or anything, I just wanted feathers ruffled a bit at Everton, because I'm like, do you know what, Gad? It's time. I know you've had hard jobs, but who's holding you to account? Now, should it have been someone who currently owns 45% of another Premier League club who wasn't close to buying the Everton? Probably not. Like, it definitely shouldn't have been. But at the same time, I was like, well, maybe it's time to get people's backs up a bit. So, hopefully now we're just going to see that thing of, whatever they come in, they make those decisions, they stick by those decisions, and importantly, they have a plan of how to get there. And that's what we didn't have with Moshiri. The stadium aside, which even that has been botched because of ultimately more through circumstance with how they chose to fund the stadium. Like at the time when they did it, he was hoping the interest rates would come down. He was like, well, in the meantime, I'll fund it myself and everything like that. Then, of course, there's a pandemic and a war, and despite what the independent commission said in Everton's first BSR hearing, I don't think you can necessarily predict a global pandemic, and then a war to take place within 18 months. But ultimately, it's a mistake on Moshiri's part. But everything else, from a footballing perspective, Moshiri had this vague idea of wanting to get there. He just had no idea how to do it. And every time he did something, he then interfered with it anyway. So what we need to see is just them putting proper people in place, a proper plan and a strategy. And then, as Rodger said, letting that play out.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting on what you both said about Farewell, because I think in that interview, to me, it just sounded like Dyche. Like, you can tell they've worked together a lot recently, because it felt like very simple, obviously in a different accent and a different tempo in the way they were speaking, but it just sounded very much like Dyche. And I think to me that I think with Dyche and maybe Farewell a bit, they've gone maybe into self-preservation mode now, in the sense that maybe one of them, probably Dyche, knows he's almost certainly not going to be here at the end of the season, and it's kind of trying to shape the narrative to his own will and to make himself look best. And I think Farewell is maybe thinking, I might not have a job as well, and I'm either trying to bend this to my will in the sense of how I can look the best, or I'm getting this out there so the new people who come in know because I imagine he would have known, wouldn't he, last week? Obviously, this is pure speculation. He would have known that this deal was potentially quite close. Rodger?
Yeah, but the point about that Thelwell interview, right? It may have gone under the radar. Julia said this was booked in 2 weeks earlier, right? This wasn't a reaction. This was booked in 2 weeks earlier, and that's just bullshit. I'm sorry, it's bullshit. Director of football should come out and be talking to the fans through the official club channels, not through a booked-in interview 2 weeks earlier. With Julia's wonderful and does a great job, but it was just nonsense. It was absolute nonsense, that interview, the timing of it and the content of it. And the fact that, it was just like pre-arranged 2 weeks earlier just shows you what a shambles the comms is.
Yeah, I do get that. We all work, we both work in media, don't we, Matt? And how quickly it changes. Like, I get that, especially with a football club, especially with a director of football, is a busy job. I understand that. But to me, and I'm sure like other journalists would agree, booking an interview in 2 weeks in advance, you then have to accept that there's going to be some things that happen in that time that may make the interview difficult, or may make, well, every interview should be difficult, to be honest, I think. But even if you're going well, it should always be, how can you do it better? But yeah, that I do echo that point, and it does come back to, again, it comes back to the standards at the club, how things are done. I don't mind a director of football speaking to the media. I don't mind if they do it through the club channels. It's not really, as long as the message is getting out there, but it needs to be done regularly, and it needs to be done to actually address the issues that fans are saying at the time, rather than something that's pre-planned necessarily.
The thing for me as well, and I was going to ask you about the Friedkin group and the potential concerns, and the one, I was listening to Gab Marcotti talking about this, and he was sort of saying that one of the big factors at the moment with them is that nobody knows where they are, and that's why the CEO has taken ultimately the brunt of the abuse and stick at Roma, and how during the time there the communications have effectively been non-existent. And I think some people, I'm not really that big on communication. It doesn't really bother me that much if we've got quiet owners or a quiet director of football. I know that's different for other people. But I think you were talking about it there, Rodger, and how the comms has been awful at Everton. Is that something that worries you, or ultimately should we not have to hear from these people very often if the club's doing things well? If Everton are ticking along nicely and making progress, and signing good players and improving the league season every year, then we probably only need to hear from the director of football probably maybe once, twice a year. Like, it shouldn't have to be a regular thing, should it? So I think, provided these people come in and do well, I don't want to hear from them hardly ever, to be honest. And so the communication thing, in theory, is not a huge problem for me.
No, it's not. It shouldn't be, and I don't think any other club in the Premier League makes such a fuss of their director of football as we've done. We've talked about being a circus, haven't we? With Brands, and then with Thelwell, and Everton's director of football, this, that, and the other. Other clubs don't seem to do that. They just get on with their business quietly, and I don't care if I never hear from them, so long as there's nice. Obviously, what's happening on the pitch is good. It's progressive. We can all see a plan. We can see good players coming in. We can see players coming through the development squads, and we can see the manager improving those players and resources that he's got. And ultimately, of course, if the football's great, then the comms just follows naturally. What you don't need, forget the director of football things. What you don't need is some damn ridiculous competition, which I see they've started now with get extra points by predicting the starting 11. I mean, what sort of nonsense is this? I don't understand.
You'll have to explain this to me. Go on.
Oh, God. I'm starting to get emails now. So before every match, predict the score. And over the course of a month, what happens is you get points if you get the score right, apparently. And you also can get points for predicting the starting 11. And then the person who has the most points over the course of the season might be in with a chance of winning a signed shirt. Yeah, correct. of playing fullback the week after next. It's just like, come on, this is Janet, and it's just like it's so childish. Some of that communication that we do, and I think it's pointless. And obviously, we want clarity and we want standards, and we don't need to know the intricacies of what's going on. Nobody is ever suggesting that, but let's just have a little bit of honesty, and let's not pretend everything in the garden's rosy when it isn't. And some of the club comms is just, fanciful at that level.
Yeah, I mean, say to you, Patrick, really, in regards to the communications and any other lingering concerns about this, I suppose it's maybe being a bit picky to ask, and bit beggars can't be choosers, but anything about the Friedkin groups that you've not really liked what you've read so far?
I don't think necessarily that there has been a suggestion that they've been quite invested in transfers in a way as well, in terms of not necessarily in the sense of the Moshiri way of an agent's ringing them up and he's then ringing Marcel Brand saying we couldn't sign Gareth Bale for $700,000 a week. But it's more in the sense of there has been talk that they've had players that they've really wanted to sign and they've gone ahead with that. So I think they are involved. It's necessarily the way they do it is not as maybe upfront as Moshiri, and then they're not going to go on a national radio station and speak about it. So maybe some of that is concerning, but that was the same with Texter as well. That was definitely a concern with Texter. Now, I think with John Texter, it's really well intentioned. I think he loves football. He's obsessed with it, and he thinks himself as a bit of a director of football in himself. And maybe Leon have signed some cracking players, but then they've also had to sell a load as well. And Botafogo have signed some good players as well. But so that'd be a worry away from the communications thing. I get that the point both of you made. I think what's important to say is in Europe it's different. Europe is the director of football or the CEO will come out and speak regularly about club matters. Like Germany, they're brilliant. They interview the director of football or sporting director before every match, after every match. They're the ones who go and do the. I think it's Simon Rolfers, who's Bayer Leverkusen sporting director at the minute. He does the pre-match interview on the pitch with the TV before the game while Alonso's behind him coaching the team. Like that's a cultural thing, and it hasn't hit in England. But at the same time, I've always been like, well, it's got to start somewhere, and why not start it with Everton? We're a club of firsts. Why not start it with us? That your director of football does have a more prominent.
Would you like it to be that way? Would you prefer it to be like that?
I personally, I think it works really well because. Look, but at the end of the day, it doesn't mean that, like Roger said, if the football's good, then that's easy. Communications are easy. Everything's easy everything's easy when you're winning games. It's when it gets difficult is when you're not winning games. And I have always found Everton's communication, but maybe this is other clubs as well. And clearly it has been a bit like this at Roma, but that comes from the owners. That's different. What I find with Everton is they maybe go into the shell when it gets bad. And other clubs probably do this as well. Whereas to me, that's when you need to be most proactive with your communications. I had a chat with Paddy about this as well, and who he works closely with at Everton and with Everton for the Athletic, and he kind of said the same thing that that's when you want the clubs to be speaking to you, not giving you reassurance or anything, not giving you excuses, but that's when you want those lines of communication to be open. So that's what I'd like to see. But again, I think that comes from putting people. I think that's not an ownership decision. I think that comes from the owners saying, we're going to put someone in a position, and that person is the one who makes those decisions. And that is the CEO ultimately. I think the two key ones are to get obviously a financial officer, proper financial officer, or one who's an improvement on the last one we've had, the CEO, and then someone to engage with the fans as well on a regular basis, whoever that is. Someone who is plugged into the fan base, who can get the club's messaging across, and maybe then all the pressure isn't on a sporting director or the manager. So I think those are the three key positions at board level, and then you go down from that. Slight worries about that Friedkin thing from like their involvement in some transfers, the manager selections. I'm not 100% sure on. Then again, Mourinho did win Roma the European, the Conference League. It got them to the Europa League final, so they came within a whisker of getting that Champions League football via that. So, but still, Mourinho, was that the right pick at the time? Then obviously they went to De Rossi, and now they're on to their third manager. But that's a third manager in 4 years. It's not like it's the ninth manager in 4 years.
By all right.
It's better than us. So there are some concerns, but I think there'll be concerns with everybody. All I want to see is, I don't know if there's a good. I don't know. They could appoint the CEO of Nike. It doesn't mean he's going to do a good job at Everton, or she's going to do a good job at Everton. But you just want to see that proper plan in place, and I think that's when I'll be able to have a proper view. And I'm on the fence. I think it's good news that we've got something happening that's surely better than what's come before. Fingers crossed. And I've been the same with John Textor as well. The only thing that worried me with Textor was it was too open. So there's like a middle ground, isn't there? To hit between radio silence and whatever John Textor is.
Just before we talk about the football, last thing on this, how do you think Farhad Moshiri's feeling, Roger, about everything coming to an end? I mean, I don't think he's going to receive much in terms of money from this sale ultimately. But how do you think he'll reflect on his, what is it now, 8 years in charge of Everton?
It is 8 years. It's 8 and a bit years, isn't it? February 2016. Yeah. It's hard to be sympathetic towards him, but he is going to leave us with a shiny new stadium, which is something that we've needed for a very long time. And Patric's right, rather, that couldn't have predicted the war in Ukraine and the pandemic, but really should have gone for fixed price contracts, and things might have been a bit easier for him. He's poured bad money after good. He's made horrific appointments, and he's lost an awful lot of money. I'm still dubious as to whether it was his all along. And I feel a bit sorry for him, but I'll be absolutely delighted to see the back of him. And, the nonsense, the entourage, the ongoing circus that he brought with him. It's been a really stressful 8 years, and can't really come to an end soon enough.
Yeah, I'm saying to you, Patrick, go on, mate.
No, so I did see something that was, I think it was a tweet that said, 8 years ago, if you'd have been told Moshiri brought us the new stadium, finally, within touching distance. James Rodriguez, Carlo Ancelotti, one of Europe's most highly sought after sporting directors when he appointed Marcel Brands, all that. And he leaves as probably definitely one of Everton's worst owners.
And 3 relegation battles.
Yeah, it is crazy. And then on the flip side, you say he brought us, Romelu Lukaku's voodoo or mum's voodoo dolls.
Yeah.
The Hadjuk split curse, the relegation battles and Rafa Benitez. So it's been a mix, hasn't it?
Yeah. The Sky Sports phone calls and the Talk Sport notes you sent to Jim White were a particular high point. But yeah, I mean, listen, we all got swept along on it initially, didn't we? But the wheels came off in spectacular fashion. But listen, hopefully better days are ahead for Everton from that point of view. Go on, mate.
There were some sliding doors moments, I think, during it as well, and that's with everybody here. If I'm a bit indifferent on Marcel Brands, but I do think if he'd been left to his own devices, we may have seen something different. I think we'd have definitely seen a more financially prudent model during those days of. I mean, I know that came after the 2017 summer, but it was we'd maybe seen those big moves, those players moved on quicker, or we'd have seen more financially prudent purchases, perhaps. But I don't think Marcel Brands was in any way perfect, by the way. I think that needs to stay, and I think he gets away with a lot, to be honest. 100%. But at the same time, I also appreciate he was dealing with a lot of crap. Like, I wasn't lying about the Gareth Bale thing. I think Moshiri did report, like, bring him up at 2 a.m. and say we can sign Gareth Bale. It's like, what are you doing? So again, it's a bit of both there, and the sliding doors moments, like, you know, the Ancelotti thing. Those brilliant days of that first, obviously the horrible lockdown season. But, you know, if we'd have won one more game in that last 10 matches, we'd have qualified for Europe. And could things have been different because of that? And then again, a point in Benitez. I think the one, and then everything that's come from that, and this isn't totally saying it's all on Benitez, but if they'd have got that appointment right in 2021, if they'd have gone for David Moyes, who was available then and wanted the job again, or they'd have let Marcel Brands have his say in 2021, then when there was Gaultier or Potter who were interested, yes, we wouldn't have had the money, but we had a very decent squad at that point still. And they'd have just got that appointment right and not meddled and not gone with Benitez and turned everything into Bayer, then again, I think that could have been another moment. So, you know, there's probably a show in that when he finally does leave, hopefully, that, you know, there's a lot of moments where things could have changed, but ultimately they went the way they have done, and he carries the can for that.
And don't forget, Ronald Koeman got us into Europe.
Yeah.
The best manager we had in the Moshiri era was Ronald Koeman.
Do you think so?
And, well, I mean, of course, Carlo...
On results, yeah.
Carlo got a few more points, but, you know, look at the stats. Koeman got us into Europe. He got us 7th. You talk sliding doors. I did something on Toffee Web about sliding doors, and the biggest sliding door of all would have been, of course, had Martinez got us to one of those finals in 2016. And what are you going to do, you know? Yeah. You know, win the FA Cup in 2016. What are you going to do? You're still going to sack him, Farhad, are you?
Or Lukaku signing a contract, I guess. There's a lot of moments.
Bring him back. Please
scoring that penalty in the semi-final. Yeah. I mean, there's just loads, isn't there? Like the Benitez one for me was like that was the moment. Like, I think you're right. There's been some things which have been out of his control, and maybe in time we'll look back on and think, you know, might have been a bit harsh judge there. But the Benitez one where it was like, right, he's like you said, Patrick, there were obvious more suitable candidates, and he chose this huge risk. Like it was such a huge risk, and everybody know. I remember like doing shows and talking about the time, and everyone was saying at the time, like when you get a new manager and you always look for, like we're doing now with the Friedkin group, when new people come into the football club, be it owners, directors, players, managers, you always try and be positive, don't you? And you always try and talk about why this is a good thing and why it's going to work. When Benitez came in, I just remember having conversations about like this is not going to work. This is all going to end in tears. Even to the point where I remember looking at the fixture list, and we talked about the fixture list, and we were saying, when Liverpool plays at Goodison in December, they're going to be beating us and singing his name. And it happened. It was all so predictable. And the fact that he persisted with that and chose to go down that route, when I imagine there would have been people around him, if he'd listened and saying to him, this is going to end in flames. And he still went ahead of it. That was the big turning point for me, where I think it all sort of spiraled out of control.
And do you remember the photo, though? Do you remember the photo welcoming him, where they're all spaced out at Finch Farm? You've got Duncan Ferguson couldn't, I think, have been standing any further away from Benitez.
Yeah.
Denise is on the other side, and it's like these people have been assembled and for this photo, but please, you know, none of them wanted to be there. It was an unforgivable appointment, absolutely unforgivable appointment. Should never ever have happened. I don't care whether he'd won, you know, 6 Champions Leagues in a row. He was never ever welcome at the football club. It was disastrous.
There's the weird interview he did with Jazz, where they were both looking the same way and like they were in different.
The Moshiri one, that was brilliant. Yeah.
We will sign a striker, which I know he got turned against him, but Danjuma was literally at the training ground when that interview was given, and then the day later he's gone to Spurs. It's like, oh god, yeah, and yeah. Weirdly edited interview. That's some real highlights. I think we're gonna have to go back through all this.
We'll have to do a full show on this. Yeah, the Moshiri years in detail. The quick
I don't
5
think
minutes.
We're a museum anymore, though, are we? I don't think we're a museum anymore.
No.
We're just a car crash.
Deary me. Deary me. 5 minutes. We've got a game on Saturday. Crystal Palace at Goodison Park. Do you think this all this stuff that's happened this week, Roger, will have any impact in terms of lightening the mood and people relaxing a little bit? Because it has been very tense, hasn't it, so far at Goodison this season? Obviously, we've had 2 home defeats in the league, the penalty shootout loss in the cup. Surely everyone will be a bit more chilled out, and we might have Jared Branthwaite back, which is probably the most important thing.
Yeah, but it's always Palace, isn't it? Why is it always Palace?
It's always a massive game now, isn't it, Goodison?
It's always a massive game. I mean, do you remember the one where the roof blew off and it had to be replayed, and as a result, we didn't make Europe under Martinez? That was Palace's fault as well.
Rick Wee's fault, that.
The Rick Wee game, yeah.
That's right. The Rick Wee game, exactly right. That one. Look, it should lighten the mood, shouldn't it? It should make us more positive, and returning players back, not just on the grass, but in full-time training. I read that Ganagay's back, so more options in central midfield. Branthwaite's massive, isn't he? I don't just mean physically. He's obviously hugely important, and quite a lot of pressure on him as a young lad. And Palace are dangerous, and Palace haven't really started the season very well. And Eze's due a goal, and you look through it, who's due a goal from their side. You've got to worry about us defensively still, that's in the fullback areas. But more options in midfield, and Dye's brilliant. God, pick him every game. And DCL's on form, so plenty of reasons to be optimistic. But it's Palace, and it's Everton, and it's home, and the first goal is going to be crucial. But for God's sake, don't go 2-0 up, because God knows what's going to happen then.
Look what this club have done to us. We're saying don't go 2-0 up in a football match. Like, oh, dearie me. But what do you think about it, Patrick? Palace had a weird start, haven't they?
Yeah, I think
they've played a bit of a different system. I think they've obviously lost Elise and Anderson. Seems to be playing 3 at the back now. They got 2 up top with Nketiah and Mateta. It just feels like a few players just trying to, find the way in this new system the manager's playing.
He's the one who's due a goal then, Nketiah. He hasn't scored for them yet, has he?
Oh, hasn't he?
There you go.
Yeah, I think he only made his date, yeah. Look, the danger, I think Palace, they've got a load of groks who always seem to play well against us, but Jordan Ayew went to Leicester and had a shocker last week, so that's good. He's gone. Mateta obviously has a decent record against us, and he is in form now. Eze is dangerous. Look, they're a good side. I think they've had drawn the last 3 games. It's just not quite clicking for them at the minute. But I'm confident. I do think Dyche, I do think this will be the game he pulls it out of the bag and gets something, because he has to. With what we've talked about now, I don't see if he loses if the team lose on Saturday. I'm sorry, he shouldn't be here. He should be gone. He should be gone in that next international break. I don't care who the ownership is. The talk, a lot of it is about, well, he's due about an 8-9 million payoff. And it's like, well, how can we afford it? Now, if this ownership's going through, then there's going to have to be, they don't want to pay someone 9 million, but it's going to have to be a decision that somebody makes, because we can't keep throwing away points. I'm sorry, there's just not, and he won't be getting any better, and he's not helping. But I do think, I've thought this for the last few weeks, I thought last week ahead of it, you sometimes wake up with a feeling of I think we're winning today. For some reason, I had that against Villa. I was genuinely confident. I was because of the Bournemouth thing, I was thinking, I think we might do something. I think we might pull out a random result. And we went 2-0 up, and I was thinking, oh yeah. And then I remembered it's Everton, and I was as soon as they scored, I'm no, we're done. We're done for now. So I don't know. I feel like it feels a bit like we played them in October in Lampard's season. Well, the second season when he got sacked. And we battered them, didn't we? Beat them 3-0. It was
yes.
That was when Lampard, the one time it clicked how he wanted Everton to play, and it clicked well. And the one time he managed to get it together. And I just have a feeling we might see something similar. I don't think we'll necessarily run them off the park, but I think we saw enough last week, and I think there'll be enough optimism in the crowd, in the home crowd, to get going, to forget what's come, not forget what's come before, but to really kind of get it up. The issue is, as Roger said, if we go 2-0 up, everybody's going to be thinking, so it's if we are going to go 2-0 up, it needs to be, I was going to say in the 89th minute, but the 96th minute, and that'll be it. So I think I expect to catch you on, but I do fancy us on Saturday. But I do think it is it's got to be time. Like, it is a must win, really, because, you know, we can't be going into that Newcastle game, which would be the 7th game of the season, and having just 2 points or 1 point. Like, we keep talking about it being the exact same start as last season, and obviously the results have fallen a bit differently. But yes, it is in terms of points. But our goal difference is worse. All the underlying metrics are worse. Like, this time last year, we had a high XG going forward and a low XG against, and we were genuinely could say we've been a bit unlucky. It's not the case this year. Like, I think on XG against, we're 19th or 20th. So we're right down there. We're where we belong to be, essentially, based on those metrics as well. Again, small sample size, and what matters is what actually happens on the pitch. But it is a good thing for trends. So it's time. It's do or die time a bit. And I think if Dyche, you know, wasn't feeling a bit hot under the collar, which I think he has been, and I think he will be now with the new ownership coming in, I think it is time to book his ideas up. You know, if he wants a job for the rest of the season, if he wants a chance to show that he could maybe take this team forward, I don't think he can. But if he wants a chance to try and prove that he can do it, you know, is a manager with a lot of experience and a lot of a self-belief, then he needs to start winning games.
Yep, absolutely, 100%. Big game on Saturday. And folks will surely turn to that now after the positive news in the week. Like I said earlier on, if you watch us on YouTube, do leave us a comment, do hit like, do hit subscribe to get notified on all of our videos. And if you're listening on Spotify or iTunes, do leave us a rating, do leave us a review. We will leave it there. Cheers to Patrick, cheers to Rodger.
Right.
Really fascinating stuff that on our potential new owners. We'll be back later in the week with weekend preview and mailbag, and then instant reaction on Saturday to that game against Palace. We'll speak to you then. Up the toffees.